except that I didn't set it up correctly today. You have the option to record to a format that won't get corrupted if it gets cut off in the middle, so I should be good, but I have not actually checked them individually. So the VODs, though, will those it'll solve regardless. Like, it'll hold on to those little videos on demand. You look up above the little channel thing, you'll see videos too, and those should be the broadcast in full. Other thing, I am not. We've got quality encoding options today. After digging around for a solution on that, after I know some people had some problems with that yesterday, it turns out that you can, when you're not an affiliate, when you're brand new, and you're not making Twitch any money, basically, whether you get encoded is a dice roll. It's totally random. So you can try to stop your stream a bunch when you are kind of in that starting soon thing, and then check it from a different computer to see if you have those options. So that's what I did today. That's what I'll keep doing in the future to make sure we get that every time. So that was another thing I sort of sorted out. So, is that already everything I wanted to update us on? Again, I apologize for getting cut off. Almost finished everything I wanted to talk about. The one thing I didn't get to is, the encoding was a big thing. So, I unfortunately have had to prioritize the production of this more than the content of it, which is the opposite of how I would normally prioritize things. But I know it's completely intolerable to watch a stream that is desynced, is choppy, that's got static. So I've set this thing up as well to be a little bit easier for me to monitor and fix things like the echo to isolate the problem. So we're going to get a little better all the time. I really appreciate everyone's patience. I can't believe how many of you have been here to see this and see me stumble. It's like, wow, maybe it would have been all right to go through one stream or two with like no one watching to sort of this out. But by the end of this whole Evangelion run, hopefully all the kinks will be worked out. And this can be just a regular part of what we do. I've enjoyed the conversation so much. That's what I wanted the most out of all of this. So I know you're here to hear what I have to say for whatever reason. But for me, selfishly, seeing your interaction is why I wanted to go to all this effort. So, hello. So I think that's all the news. Now, my throat's already gone. The music's coming from a separate computer entirely now. I'm listening to it if it cuts out, but if it goes out, it's going to take me a second to fix. Oh man, I totally forgot. My little One I've had for 20 years. I did make a guest appearance on the stream yesterday, so he's just hanging out back here because I don't have anywhere else to display him. Does this grasping on for dear life mean anything? So, yesterday, at the end, we almost finished everything I want to talk about. We got cut off before I was able to finish the subs versus dubs personal anecdote, and I was watching to see if Solantic, that's your name, who I promised, Soladic, but that's what you meant, to make sure you were in here. So, this is not as big a deal as it's going to be now that I talked about getting it cut off and wishing to share it. Yes, you. Oh, no. I said I'd make sure that you were around to hear the story. So, it would have been a minor thing to add on to what we were talking about last time. And now being cut off with the thunder and all that is, now it's a much bigger deal it is. So this is going to be very disappointing. By the way, let's hands out to Mother Nature for that epic foreshadowing yesterday, where the thunder was actually coming across the stream for a bit before I lost power. Yes, the fire on the whiteboard. Gosh, you're right. How do I manage that? So here's a story that I wanted to tell at the end of last episode, the end of episode 4, where we had talked about what I thought was the key moment, where Toji and Kensuke expressed empathy to Shinji for the pain he was going through, and that was a real key point for him. But that's not where the actual episode ends. It actually ends with him not getting on the train, and Misato rushing to try to catch him after she has her own kind of understanding about what makes Shinji tick. And she thinks she hasn't got there in time. It pulls away, and they see each other, right? Now, when I watched Evangelion the first time, many years ago, I watched the dub. And so I just was hearing all in English. And at the end of that episode, they do an exchange where they're on the train platform. And of course, all right, sorry. That's gonna happen a few times today, but it's quick to get back. And so it is translated into Shinji says, I'm home. And Sato says, welcome home. Now, as a guy getting into anime and not knowing much about Japanese culture, that didn't resonate, right? It seemed even melodramatic. But you could tell ending the episode that way, even younger me understood that there was some significance to that exchange, right? But watching the dub, and I wondered, I'm like, what does that mean? All right, and I put it aside and didn't worry about it. Years later, know a little bit more about anime, started watching things in subtitles, listening to the original Japanese, and I rewatched Evangelion, and I realized what they do at the end of that episode is the Tadaima Okaide Nasai exchange, which Shinji had difficulty doing the first time he moved into Misato's apartment. That was the getting them on first name basis with each other, telling him to consider it his home. And so when he does that little call and answer, you realize, I eventually realized just from osmosis, that that's something you only do in your own home. When you go into other people's homes, when you are a stranger, it's a different kind of social ritual. And that is what he tried to do at first. And so watching it later and seeing that was what it actually was. It was not him saying, I'm home, while he's there on the train platform. It was indicating that he now thinks of it as home. That's something you only do going into your own home. And she realizes the significance of this and responds in kind. And so that was my kind of personal experience with what is gained or lost if you choose subtitles or the dub. And it's that and things like honorifics are one of the reasons I've now only prefer subs going down the line. Because that episode didn't make the impression on me that it went for originally. That ending fell flat because just saying, I'm home, welcome home, doesn't have the same significance in English. You understand? So that is my personal experience with Evangelion and going from dubs to starting preferring to subtitles. Now, I don't want to start a whole debate about subs versus dubs. Quite aside from my own preference, my large philosophical stance on it is that whatever makes the experience more enjoyable for you is the right answer for you. A lot of people, me included, got into anime not from watching subtitles, but from watching a dub in their language. a rising tide lifts all ships. We're all better off. We all benefit if more people are interested in the hobby, buy the DVDs, subscribe to the services that stream, regardless of who it is. I mean, regardless of where it is, whether you're getting both subs and dubs. And so, while scratchy. So, in spite of my own preference, I do not ascribe to the notion that we should belittle or think less of all of the dubbing in the industry, people who prefer them. I especially understand if reading is not your strong suit, and you want to see everything happening on the screen. You know, sometimes as much as you gain from being able to hear it in the original language and pick that up, something can be lost in the effort you spend looking at just part of the screen instead of the entire visual presentation. It's a visual and audio medium. So I'm not even sure for every scene in every episode that one is clearly better than the other. So that is my thing. Yes, so I do know dubs have increasing quality, and the irony here, of course, is that as that has happened, I have increasingly not ever listened to them. So I don't even know how good they are. But I will tell you that there are still some shows that I watched, and it is hard for me to go back and watch the subtitle version. So, for example, and this is a kind of a famous example because of what a good job they did. The Cowboy Bebop dub versus the sub is one where I just can't. The sub feels too different to me. That was too familiar. And the same thing goes with Full Metal Alchemist, both of those actually. Because by the time I got around to watching it as in subtitles, I had already listened to a lot of, what's her name? Ray Kugamaya. And I couldn't not hear her as Alphonse. And so that, both of them, actually, yeah. And those are pretty good dubs, you know, as they go. So it's not like it's not like, well, I don't want to be critical, but yeah. Sorry, I'm watching your things. Oh. So I've got a couple of donations I just want to read. Sorry. Himiko, best girl. I like that people are using their nicknames to try to get there. Keep up all the quality content. Theta, love from Mexico. Thank you very much. And fear. No message, straight to the point. Like it. Thanks a lot, guys. That pays for 3 months of the music streaming. Just like that. Awesome. Thank you. But yeah, you're talking about the voice actress pool being small. Even in Japan, where it's a competitive and highly visible industry, you begin to start being able to pick out individual voice actors and actresses. So in the dubbing communities, I imagine every country, that pool is even smaller, and you start to associate the same characters across. To me, this is actually one of the advantages of animation over live action, is that if you watch a live action anything, we're really good at recognizing people's faces. And so if you associate an actor or an actress with some other iconic role, sometimes that interferes with your ability to believe them as a character in this new role. Animation does not have this problem, but sometimes the voices can be so distinct that becomes the problem instead. But the bigger the cast and the more talented the crew, the less of an issue that is. So, hold on. So that was the sub versus dub story that got cut off last time. Not a big deal by itself, but it dovetailed into the other connection to Shinji. Because I didn't realize the significance of that when I watched the first time, simply because that little bit was lost in translation. And being the very last thing that happens, obviously it was meant to be significant. So I could tell that. It must be significant. But why? Now I know. Oh yeah, the other thing I changed. So the bot is still catching little things. There's only certain URLs that are approved, but I changed the timeouts on everything to down to like 10 seconds or something like that. I cannot figure out to how to keep it from deleting all the other messages. That seems to be a Twitch side thing. If anyone knows that, by all means tell me, because I would just rather get rid of the offending message and nothing else. So, yes. So, yeah, it'll definitely stop symbol attempts, as people will use them to try to get slurs through the filter. You know, we don't want that. So, good morning. Yeah, it's a real shame. I wish there was a way to only get rid of a single message. But, you know, a total moderation. This takes a lot of the strain off of the people who are volunteering to moderate for me, and this is just me trying to make it a little easier on them. By the way, thanks guys. I see the two of you today. I really appreciate your help. Really helped set a good tone. And I know spoilers are the one thing that's really hard to check, and the thing that makes my stream different than a lot of the streams you're going to find. And so I appreciate everyone's efforts. I appreciate everyone kind of self-policing on that. Because you can tell from the chat, some people really are watching this as we go. They really are maintaining their spoiler integrity. And I want us all to respect that. Yeah. So I'm going to read this one real quick, then we'll actually get into the things. Laplace Seidel? Thank you for the second session yesterday. I'm glad that you and your equipment survived the thunderstorm and power outage. Me also. I didn't rest very easily at first, thinking, gosh, man, so one of these things is fried. There's no way I can replace it on a Sunday morning. I'm also glad you were able to share your story that was cut off at the end, too. Me too. It lost the relevance that I was talking about at the time, but at least now you know. And I got to talk about how I feel about subs versus dubs in a general way. You know, I went to a convention once, and there was a representative from Crunchyroll there, and it came up talking about Funimation, which is the main kind of dubbers for us in, I think, all of North America. And it was, I think people kind of set him up, or wanted him to, you know, maybe rag on his competitor a little bit. At the time, they weren't working together. And he shut that down pretty fast. He was like, no, they raised the visibility of anime countrywide. Everyone's better off for them succeeding. You know, they are competitors in one sense, but they are allies in another. And of course, it was like, you know, a year later, they started doing things together. I know they're owned by Sony now, so it's a different situation. But I thought the guy had a great point. I kind of incorporated that into my own approach to the whole thing. So, all right. How about we actually talk about episode 5 now, huh? You missed the story. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's just not that big a deal. All right. It is extra hot in here today. I'm sorry. Let us look at the beginning of this. So episode 4 ended a little bit of an arc, a little bit of an introductory arc into Shinji adapting it all to his environment, leading people, getting acquainted with Earth. Now it's just not him, right? We are also being introduced to all this. We're all getting our first look at all of it. It's a very, it gave us emotional stakes in the person who is our viewpoint, and gives us a little bit of a conclusion at the end with him being able to connect to his classmates, being able to connect to Misato, both of them maybe understanding each other a little better. So this episode picks up where those things have happened, essentially. Like this is a new day for Shinji. And so, appropriately, it shifts over to focus on a different character. Not entirely, it's all still kind of Shinji's show. But for the first time, Rei becomes a little bit less of a mystery. And it begins by taking us back in time to our little startup sequence that went so wrong. So again, I'm sorry the clip markers don't work, so I do have to search. But it will be fixed by tomorrow, I'm pretty sure. So the key thing from this, as far as how it affected Ray, it fills in a little bit of our own understanding of the world, right? Seeing the test, seeing what it goes through, walking all the way through this, like, the techno speak, and where it does this little borderline thing, kind of setting us up to anticipate that and to have a meeting, watching it flow backwards, right? There's a lot of just giving us things we know we don't understand to emphasize that this is technology that we don't understand. We're not supposed to. But we can at least recognize that lots of green bars disappearing is probably a bad thing. The panic in the voice of the technicians, that's probably a bad thing. We don't need to understand it. So, Unit 0 starts to go berserk. And this goes back to how kind of human they are. Gosh, I really wish I could just skip to this marker. But when it breaks out of its restraints, and it is freaking out, this is an incredibly human way to respond. Is this pain in its head, or is this like crushing existential angst? Mono. Okay, sorry. Had to reset the audio again. So we're just going to do that every 10 minutes, apparently. But it's still better than the desync. Anyway, at this point in time, we don't understand enough about what's going on to make that guess. But it tells us once again that these things are not... They're not just robots responding to commands. There's something else is going on here. They're both filling in our picture of the world and deepening the mystery at the same time. Great little detail, just because I'm right on top of it. The fact that the power cord has little retro boosters to stop it from hitting hard is just it's a totally unnecessary detail. No one would ever fuss at them for not including that, but they did, right? They thought through that kind of detail. Like, what would you really do to try to protect this equipment? So then, after the existential angst, or whatever it is that's going on with Unit 0, it starts pounding on the glass. Well, that is also a very easy to understand gesture. That is murderous rage, that is punching against the world, and it seems very deliberate that it's punching right at Gendo. Not just randomly, not just whatever, it is centered on him. You can see that the pattern of the punches there. Coupling that with the Ava holding its head and be obviously distressed, wow, that really raises a lot of questions. And yes, I agree. It also creates an impressive sense of scale. The size of these fists, the power of these things is on display. But of course, it freaking out is not the real important part of this whole scene. What it really is the response of Gendo to Rei being ejected and then falling from the ceiling when the retro rockets stop working correctly. Him showing, this is by far the most concern we've seen him show for anyone. Up to this moment, it was believable that he had no human emotions at all, right? I mean, everything's been so pragmatic from his voice. Everything's about utility. But that is distress. I mean, that is not a pain-induced response. That is him panicking because of what's happening to Rei, right? Now, I began yesterday's stream with a little silly little Gendo pose for you. But the reason you knew exactly what I was doing was the gloves and the glasses. They're not an exact match, but it's enough. Those are pretty recognizable hallmarks of his character. But because of this scene here, we discover that that is actually a recent affectation, both of those things. And since we don't get to know a lot of Gendo before this point, we don't know if the way we see him behave towards at least the rest of the staff, like his day-to-day behavior, if that's different than it would have been before this moment. Because here's a guy who's showing a lot of concern for his subordinate. We have a little bit of clue as far as, let me find the clip, where this seems pretty surprised. She seems pretty surprised at his behavior, right? And so that tells us that this might be more different than what she would expect. But why Rei in particular? And so anyway, the point about the glasses and the gloves is that that's such a recognizable part of his character to us visually. And it makes me wonder if the fact that it comes from this event, both of those things, because he changes glasses style, is we're supposed to associate that with his character, who he is after this moment, not who he is all the time, right? Sorry, every time the audio has to be reset, you just don't hear me for a minute. So the glasses melt here. Well, I guess the stuff in the cockpit, the LCL in the cockpit, must be superheated. We see the steam escaping it when it vents, so that's what I'm guessing was going on. But we know the actual exterior of that thing is hot, so I'm guessing it is actually heating up what it's sitting in, hot enough to actually melt the glasses. Which makes them unusable to Gendo, but perfect for being cast aside and picked up by Rei. Now, I talked yesterday about how there are two titles for most episodes. There is the actual Japanese title, which this one I believe is Rei, her heart, or something just like that. I think it used to be translated as Rei Beyond Her Heart, which seems a different interpretation, honestly. But the English title of this episode and the next one is Rei 1 and Rei 2. Which just Rei, the other side of heart. Yeah, it's something like that. And so already we know, just from this little opening sequence, that we're finally going to focus on Rei, right? We're finally going to peek a little behind the mystery girl with the blue hair. Now, the first thing that happens after this is Rei and Ritsuko talking about Rei. Misato and Ritsuko talking about Rei, and talking about how she is a blank slate, how she has no past, her records are deleted, which, yes, deepens her mystery, but it also implies that because we've seen her behavior, we know that Rei is blank in more ways than one. And I'm not sure where I was going with that. Oh, right. Obviously, Rei is a big mystery to Shinji, and therefore to the audience as well. But this little exchange from these two tells us that Rei is kind of a mystery to everybody. It's not just that Shinji is playing catch-up. It's more that Rei is just inherently mysterious. And yes, I agree. Considering that Misato is her commander, the fact that even she doesn't know these things, once again, hints at A, how inscrutable Rei is, but B, how much the information is quarantined inside Nerve. That your actual operations level commander, or whatever their terminology would be, doesn't know these things, right? Anyway, let's see if I can't clip hunt here instead of just talking about the things. We're going to solve this. So while we do a little more peek inside Rey this time, right? It's hard to say if she's really characterized this episode. We at least get a little more of a sense of her. But who is actually kind of characterized a little bit is Ritsuko. We get to see her enthusiasm when she is discovering the little what they recover from the angel. Gives her a little bit of that, not necessarily a moral scientist, but we get to see her in the white coat and getting all excited about the scientific discovery. I mean, look at that eagerness, right? I mean, that's one of the first kind of hints of the human emotion we've seen from her, other than, giving Misato the business. But I think that Misato brings that out of everybody. And this won't be the end. There'll be more of her being... let's talk about it now. She then is set up to become kind of our expo speak character. But now it's relevant. It's not just her giving a, as you know, kind of speech. She is actually the authority here. And so this is actually a very organic situation that would pop up, where she's excited to analyze this. Misato and Shinji happen to be standing around. She listens to tell them, and therefore us, about the whole thing, that angels are composed of something that is both wave-like and particle-like, a totally foreign kind of matter. Their equipment can't even analyze it, and yet the almost horrifying truth that the way their structure is arranged looks way, way too much like human DNA to be any kind of accident. Which again is just not something they're going to tell us right away. But while we've been going all along and getting instances of the Evas themselves being very human-like, and the pilot, or at least Shinji, sometimes being robot-like in his own behavior, this shows that not only the angels very similar to the Evas, angels must share some kind of, maybe some very important similarities with humans. Or what? This is a real point in the story where the mystery becomes less about giant, unknowable things and more about the hints of almost a conspiracy, right? Like, there's obviously a pattern here. There's obviously something below the surface that is really essential to what is going on, the behavior of these things, what they're after. Even though there's no language, there's no way to communicate, we only see the aggression. They're obviously, or it's implied that they won't always be so inscrutable, right? So, inscrutable. I can't English today. It's a shame, it's all I speak. I probably should know how to English. Now, this is where we get the story of the burned hands. And there's a little bit that kind of characterizes Misato here. That when Shinji refuses to say what it is he was looking at, she already understands enough about him to say that, listen, I know that is actually your way of wanting someone to ask you. It's like if someone brings something up apropos of nothing, hypothetically, they're hoping you ask, right? They're hoping they have a chance to tell whatever it is they're on their mind. And she already knows enough about Shinji to understand this when she sees it. So that gives us the glove story. We went through that. We don't have to go back over that. But the critical part for Shinji is hearing that his father would even do something like that. And that is surprising just by itself, but that makes his... there's a scene later where, and I'm sorry, I will not be able to find that very quickly, but I'll look. When you later are gosh, where is it? What is this situation? Hey, there we go. Let's go to the little film room here. When he's sitting in his Evangelion, looking across the way, he's kind of watching Rei because she's kind of on his mind. He's certainly curious, but he gets to see this whole exchange between Rei and Gendo, and Rei looks like not that blank slate. She looks like an actual person. If you're just watching this, no indication of these characters before now. I mean, she clearly perks up when Gendo arrives, leaps down, runs right up to him, clasps her hands in front of her, like she's clearly excited to see him. Like the body language is really easy to understand. She even seems to be laughing, which is hard to believe. Maybe she's just coughing. But not only is she pleased, Gendo is warm to her in return. But what's great about this scene is that Shinji can't hear what they're saying. He now has the story. He now knows the story about the burned hands. He now has the He now knows the story about the burned hands, and that's already on his mind. And so now, watching this exchange between the two of them, his imagination's allowed to run wild, right? He could sit here and imagine this father figure who has been absentee, essentially, complete emotionally distant this whole life, is able to be warm to someone his age. And since he can't hear it, he can only imagine it being not worse than he thinks. But he can read any amount of empathy and warmth into what's happening since he can't hear it, yet the body language is so clear. The body language is so easy to read. There's almost like a bit of paranoia in Shinji here. It's definitely, if Rei wasn't interesting to him. I'm sorry, the gap, yeah. Alright, we're going to keep rolling with it. In a pinch, I can hook it back into the other thing, but we'll probably get the latency back. Anyway, pressing on. Just keeps it exciting. So Shinji gets no answers from that. Really, he just gets more questions, but this doesn't help his sense of self, right? Now it's no longer, you kind of see how he is clearly distressed there. Now it's no longer necessarily only that Gendo can't relate, or has no interest in children, or can't make any kind of empathetic link with anybody. Rather, now Shinji can think, maybe it's me. Not the right thing, not the right conclusion. But definitely someone as insecure as Shinji can run down that line. Here is proof for the first time, in his eyes, and maybe even to us at this point, right? That definitely seems like a very warm exchange. We saw his desperation rescuing Rei from the entry plug. And so, it's not that Gendo's incapable of doing this. He just doesn't do it for Shinji, which is way worse. And I think you're all right. I think there's a little bit of paranoia for him, and he's going to internalize that. He's not going to conclude, oh, my father can be warm to someone. Now I have a opportunity. Maybe I should work harder, or we could fix this. It's more like, I guess I was the problem all along. It's just the the mind, your mind can be your own worst enemy. So like I said, we get a little more characterization of Ritsuko this time. And this little get-together, the little dinner, is a real peek beside. This is getting past her facade. And it's very clear, even though they don't say it necessarily, that she and Misato have a long history, and it's not just a work relationship, right? They get very casual, they're very comfortable here. So you can tell it's Misato's cooking the moment she tastes it. We now understand that just like Gendo obviously has some kind of side where he can be a little more humane, Ritsuko's the same way. She is not just the scientist that we have seen characterized so far. She has this side as well. When she kind of helps set up Shinji to go meet, to have an excuse to go see Rei. Where are you? There we go. I kind of feel like this is a setup. Now Misato immediately reads into it and teases him, but if Ritsuko keeps forgetting to give this to Rei, would that really happen if she was just carrying it around with her in her casual, non-work stuff? That seems hard to believe, right? So I feel like this is a bit of a setup. Yeah, I feel like she's more on top of things than that. So I think this is a very deliberate thing. But I don't know what Ritsuko's motivation is here. You know? I mean, Misato obviously immediately, gives him the side eye and then starts teasing him. But, and I think Ritsuko's expression there says that she is also enjoying this, the way he's lingering over Rei's picture as she accuses him. But what is her motivation? Yeah, I mean, she's really just playing matchmaker? That seems... I know we talked about how much small stakes matter against the background of all the high stakes. Did Misato put her up to this? I mean, I feel like this is... just this action, never mind her being so casual and obviously knowing Misato, this action is an interesting little turn of characterization for Ritsuko. Way more warmth and understanding of humanity and even enjoying this kind of thing than we would have expected from her from this point, right? I don't know. I know the whole point is to set it up so that Rei and Shinji finally have a reason to say more than 2 words to one another. But this actually gives us a pretty good peek into the 2 adult women here, right? I don't know. Again, that's economy. God, I'm losing my voice much faster today. Gosh. Now, one of the things that happens this episode, and I guess it continues in the next episode, yeah. We got past the first kind of emotional trial of Shinji here, and now we're kind of into a different hallmark of adolescence, which is the travails of puberty. And one of the popular interpretations of Evangelion is that the whole thing is a giant metaphor for adolescence, for puberty, for going through that, not coming of age, growing up in general, but that specific part of your life. I've heard critics attribute that to some of Evangelion's success, that it resonated with the teenage boy demographic that makes up so much of the anime audience in a way that things before that had not. So it seems like a pretty valid interpretation. But this episode especially is when we start focusing more of that in Shinji. These 2 girls tease him, and then when he goes back to school, which again, I can't clip hunt, I'm sorry. Well, we'll come back to that. Later on, when we go to school, we'll skip over it when we actually get there. He'll be similarly teased by Kensuke and Toji. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about that scene now, I guess. This is the first time we've seen them since that empathetic reaching out last time, right? And the way they behave with Shinji indicates that the distance has been closed between them. They're immediately able to tease him, they're immediately able to talk girls with him. Shinji doesn't feel awkward, not head down. He's engaging with them despite being put on the spot and being made uncomfortable. They seem like three teenage boys ribbing each other over the girl they might fancy, right? And so that worked, all right? I mean, we could tell that from the end of episode, I think, but now Shinji is no longer the guy who has the phone that never rings, right? That little bit of validating his pain has made them able to be friends, such as it is. And so there's a little bit of time gap in here, I think, not a huge one from last time. But I think we are meant to understand that Shinji is now getting a little piece of normalcy. His living situation is a little bit more normal. He's got friends at school, and he seems a little bit more normal now. You can root for a little bit more for him as someone who's not just a complete cavalcade of tragedy, right? So, anyway, I know I'm skipping ahead to that, but it's relevant to the fact that just as these two girls were teasing him over Ray, the friends will tease him later. In both instances, that teasing indicates friendliness, that indicates a comfort level that did not exist for Shinji with anyone at the beginning of this series, right? So, stepped on something, I don't know what. Okay. So, all that sets up the scene where Shinji goes to Rei's apartment. And we're going to try and speed this up because I know I'm running way over. There's definitely a little subversion here, where the guy comes over to the girl's apartment and lets himself in. Is this just normal behavior? I can't imagine letting myself into someone's house. But before all that happens, what we are treated to is more images of the decay of the city, of the emptiness, and realizing that Rei lives in a place like this. I mean, look at that. I would assume this is abandoned from the outside, and pretty likely not many people live here. Maybe she's the only one. I can't remember if they spell that out or not. Sorry. And I think even Shinji's surprised at the living conditions here. Has to double check to make sure that is her nameplate over the door. And it is not just an instance of a girl living in a place that doesn't suit her. On the contrary, you go inside and it's a continuation of the outside. Neglect, trash everywhere, no personalization. There's no decor, there's nothing on the walls. The really disturbingly unhygienic example of having bandages with blood just lying about. Blood on her actual pillow that she hasn't cleaned. It's a without anyone saying anything, this is a peek inside Rei's mind that is upsetting a little bit. It's a little disturbing. This is not just a well-adjusted girl who is quiet and hard to approach. There are obviously issues here that go beyond being socially awkward. Okay, Shinji is socially awkward. Shinji's place doesn't look like this. You're right. Shinji knows this is out of the ordinary. This activates his weirdness sensor, right? And he's still a bit fascinated. That's why he's looking around the room. It's why he finds the glasses and puts them on. Now, since Rey is presented to us as a typical little high school girl, high school uniform, but she works with him, I think we're expecting a little more stereotypical femininity in her room. So there's definitely a breaking of our expectations there. But they do it again with the discovery that she's taking a shower when the guy comes to visit. That happens a lot. It's coordinate. And so we expect her to be upset about this particular instance of the lucky pervert trope, because that's what even back in the 90s, you kind of expected the setup, right? It's the whole reason you send the guy into the girl's private space without warning. And so that's what he's assumed too. Again, Shinji as audience, he assumes that there's about to be hell to pay, just like we assume. But what she's actually upset about is not the fact that she's been seen in the nude, it's the fact that he's wearing the glasses, which initiates this this oddly, I don't know, this is another one of those choice of framing is important, with him looking down on her on this and her splayed out, and her not pushing him off the way she takes this and doesn't do anything to disrupt this. She asks him to get off of her. And this is not what we expect from the female protagonist in anime who's been caught out and is being accidentally groped, right? If the room wasn't enough to tell us that Rey is completely unlike what we would expect, this makes her even more alien, a little more unknowable. Yeah, you can read into the lack of decor in her room that she doesn't care about things that are not pertinent, that are not super relevant to whatever it is that she actually wants. And so the glasses being the lone affectation in all this makes them that much more important by emphasis, or by contrast. Nothing personal in here at all, except for the glasses. That is the thing she actually cares about. And we skip to here, we can see she very carefully puts them into a little case before she heads out. Now, throughout this whole little process of her getting ready, Shinji obviously understands the situation he stumbled into, and he can hardly even get his apology out. He can hardly even articulate what he's trying to do, what his excuse is, and at the same time, he can't help but lingering over the feeling of having touched Rey. And I'm sure this is the first time in his life this has happened. Not what he would have chosen, I imagine. But he's not just put out of sorts by the situation of being in a room where a girl is getting dressed, but that very first, it's not a sexual experience exactly, but I'm sure that's how it feels. Was this the first accidental groping? No. The manga tradition goes way back for that. Enough so that there is an expectation to this. Yeah, so long as there's a way to titillate audience, is somewhere someone will do it. But he's completely out of sorts here because of the situation, and again, his awkward Shinji apologizing, and yet repeatedly he can't get the feel of her out of his mind, and it keeps distracting him, and it keeps knocking his train of thought off. And so, while I am sure that Shinji's curiosity about Rey does come from a place of just she intrigues him, the fact that they're a boy and girl in adolescence is not something that it can be easily ignored, especially when you're in adolescence. And this just makes that much harder to ignore. And this is a really uncomfortable situation for Shinji. But it breaks the stalemate between them. When he follows her, because he still has her card and she doesn't know it, and this is all a setup. Oh, there's the glasses case. He follows her, rides in the train, still not talking to each other, doesn't actually interject at all until she is actually stuck. He doesn't say anything again. She even walks out of his apology because she doesn't care. The fact she's getting ready nonchalantly and he's trying not to look, it never mattered to her. But it's not until she actually can't get in and he has an excuse, a good excuse to talk to her again, that he tries to. She's not exactly appreciative, though. That's definitely a snatching it out of his hand, right? So, despite how emotionless and blank Rei is, there's a little hint of annoyance there. That's a first little, turns out to be a tiny bit of foreshadowing, that she can definitely push back. But the question is, what does she care enough about to push back against? Not being held down completely naked and vulnerable, that's not enough to make her push back. Which raises other questions. Yeah, I agree. Twitch Zero. I think they want us to feel as awkward as Shinji did. I totally agree. There's lots of things where we are meant to feel the same way Shinji does, through the person of Shinji and the situation he's put in. That's one of the things the series is very consistent with. But because of this, because it broke their normal way they interact with each other, Shinji can actually finally talk to her. They've been put too far out of the routine, and now suddenly it seems a little bit more normal to chat it out. And what he does is try to find out if she is afraid about what's happening. He actually tries to empathize with her, that he would be afraid, that he himself has gone through some of this, and he wants to know if are we the same in this way, despite being so different otherwise. And unfortunately, Rei is not. She's not meeting him halfway, right? But it does tell us something about Shinji, that now that he has an excuse to talk to her, the way he tries to initiate a conversation is with empathy. It was trying to see if she's afraid like he would be. Relates it to his own experience. Of course, she flips it around on him. That it's your father, don't you have faith in him? Don't you trust him? He's the one in charge. Shouldn't you be worried? Never minding the fact that she already knows this has failed once. Right? Like, she shouldn't have this kind of blind faith at all. But when he doesn't, when he expresses some obvious aggression towards his father, like really gets it out, she shows that she is able to push back about certain things. Not her own bodily autonomy, but him talking bad about Gendo. Who knew that was where the line would be? Now, during this I don't have the sound for the clip, but during her getting ready, she is playing over in his mind Gendo inquiring after her well-being. And I don't know if this counts as a smile for Rei, but it's pretty close, right? And this is a pleasant memory for her, being cared about, having someone else do something like this that I think, if she's like Shinji in this way at least, this indicates to her someone else sees me as valuable, that there's some value in this. And it just makes you wonder, what's her life been up to this point that this moment of kindness, of concern, would affect her so much. That she doesn't care about the extremely vulnerable state she was put in, but she does care about disparaging Gendo. again, she's a blank slate. We intentionally don't know much about her past. There's a lot we can infer about how that life has treated her, based on how this one moment of kindness affects her. This kind of dovetails into why Shinji himself was able to make a little bit of peace with the situation after Kensuke and Toji, I'm going to mess up the other guy's name, expressed their own connection to him last time. So, all the characters have little echoes of themselves in each other. So I think there is this connection, these unexpected connections between all the characters that keep showing up in little ways, and we can say, well, this is just like what happened then, and this is just like what happened then. This person and this person, despite being so different, went through something similar. And that is the actual way that people can relate to each other. Again, that's going to be a theme. We will see once again when they get the actual activation sequence. We're getting to the end of we're going to take a break here in a minute before we go to episodes. But we get to see a little peek inside where we can tell that she has the glasses in there. Oh, I might have gone past it. Anyway, she brought the glasses into the cockpit. Despite what I'm sure that's against protocol, considering how the foreign objects last time. When Toji and Kensuke got in the entry plug and that interfered with sync, I'm sure there's some prohibitions against this kind of thing, but she's done it anyway. And so, here's a question I have for you. She goes through this activation sequence this time, no problem. No hitch at all. Even though she should be even more gun-shy about it after what happened last time. So, is how Gendo responded to that and how she has internalized that the reason she succeeds so easily this time? Someone already said that. I think that's the only difference we're really given between the two activations. One that goes horrifyingly wrong, and one that goes almost boringly well. And we have that kind of totem of the glasses to bring our focus on that. And she's thinking about what Gendo said while she's getting ready, and it feels especially significant that just the tiny bit of kindness to Shinji made such a big difference, that this tiny bit of kindness to Rei is the difference between success and failure. And this success and failure, her being able to actually pilot her Evangelion, has implications for the grand over theme, right? Conflict, right? Getting another person that can pilot another Evangelion out there should be a huge deal for the welfare of humanity and the city. And as far as I can tell, it only works because of that tiny, small stakes bit of kindness. That's what actually makes it possible for Rei to power her own Evangelion. So all the big things she could do stem from that very small human thing. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to keep bringing it up because I think it's pretty critical. But how important the small moments and how important the details that you could think of as being mundane matter to the big things in the story is something that is contrasted so often, so that we naturally compare them. So I want to read somebody else's thoughts because you're on the thing. Definitely. There's a lot of parallels between Shinji and Rei. It's not just that the way they are dependent on others. That I can't pronounce your names. You have no vowels in your name. David Peebles right. I didn't mention this, but they cite the first failure as mental instability, and there was actually surprise expressed that there was mental instability in Rei. And guess from the outside, she seems very even keel. She seems like the same person all the time. For her to fail as a result of mental instability would be surprising. And so, logically, what has been cured for her between 3 weeks ago and now is that mental instability. And the only clue we have to that is that kindness from Gendo, that him putting himself in a situation where he would take pain to try to get to her. Same thing. It's easier to saving one person is easier than saving the whole world, but sometimes they are actually the same thing. Henry with an M instead. Okay, sorry, trying to pronounce his name. Yeah. Anyway, now we've gotten a little past Shinji, we get an opportunity to learn more people. This is the first hint into Rei, who is mysterious. They actually pile more mystery on her, but she doesn't seem quite so alien to us now. We didn't get all the way to understanding her, and so the stripping away her clothes, stripping away the barrier thing is actually kind of a subversion of using that as a symbol. But for the first time, she seems like someone we can get to know. The little moments of humanity with Gendo, the smile, the way she treasures the glasses, the way she's willing to push back against Shinji. Those are all little sparks of humanity. And it's somebody remind me this, someone who's seen the whole series, remind me later on that with the one exception, all these little moments of humanity we saw this time, as far as her pushing back, actually doing something to someone else, seem to arise from Shinji. The only thing otherwise is Gendo got to her somehow, affected her, and now she can succeed. But all of the other NERV staff members are surprised at all this, and so she obviously doesn't show this to anyone else. And so while she's showing all this affection toward Gendo and showing the little bit of pushing back against Shinji, not against the things we would expect, but still pushing back and being violent with him and snatching things from him, these seem to be the only two people we see her do any kind of emotional reaction to at all. She obviously is never curt or seems unstable with the other NERV members, or they would not have been surprised at her mental instability being the cause of failure. So let's just keep that in mind. All right, into this episode, we do another kind of cliffhanger with a new angel. And I think the two things I just want to point out about this before we take a break and go on to the actual next episode is that in the same episode where we find out that the angels have a DNA that matches human DNA in a weird way, we are now presented with an angel that for the first time doesn't look biological at all. The first two looked kind of like they could be, some kind of modeled after animals of some kind. This is just a very clear, very clean geometric shape. Of course I can't pull it up on demand. So I think that's interesting to show us, to close or to emphasize the similarity between them and our humans, and then to give us a model that could only be artificial, or not something you think would arise in the biological world at all, like a construction, an artifice. So I think that's interesting. The other thing I think interesting is that the thing is ready to attack Shinji the moment he pops up, and exactly where he pops up. Okay? It starts charging up its little beam before he's in sight. Okay? How does it know that? Can I just simply detect the Ava, or are we meant to read into it that the angels might have a little bit of communication between them? I don't know. It's a kind of a... It's not... We don't find anything about it because it just ends with Shinji screaming and all that. And I think my thing froze. No. I think this is going to be our second technical difficulties scene. Yeah. So I wouldn't call characterization exactly, but in a situation where we're expanding the number of people we begin to understand, we get a peek inside the angels of all things this time as well. Discovering they're made out of waves and particles, or some kind of matter that behaves that way, rather. Discovering their DNA, such as it is very human-like, and then being introduced to this model that is not biological, or doesn't remind us of anything biological, all in the same episode, is indicates to us that we're going to find out more at the mystery of the angels. Piecemeal, but that's actually a lot to discover relative to the previous 4 episodes. Let's see. We're going to take a break here in a minute because I still want to end about the right time. I'm trying to remember, is it ever clarified the AT field stands for outside of the OP? Not so far, for sure. But we'll see, I guess. There's always, since I haven't watched all the way ahead, I don't know how much they have changed certain subtitles, and I get the impression that they are trying to localize them instead of just transliterate, at least for some things. I've noticed the use of some idioms, for example, and so maybe. I haven't gone far enough to know. So, yeah. So we'll talk all about the angel and the attack and all that next time for the next episode. I am going to take a 3-minute break, I think. Change some things, and we'll be back. Tea break, yes, you're correct. A little tea with lemon is wonderful in the throat. Let's try this again. There we go. So I just wanted to stop on that face of Shinji for the clips, sorry. So the beginning of episode 6 picks up exactly where we left off in episode 5. Very obvious cliffhanger. The thing I kind of like about this, the way they handle this, is what you get to see, I think really for the first time, is NERV's competence. Like how quickly they respond to the fact that their main pilot is having a beam drilled into his chest, right? And so one of the things we learned a lot about this time is NERV. Maybe not the deep dark secrets and the secret cabal of this meeting and all that we don't understand at all yet, but we get to see them in action, right? We get to see how quickly they respond to the threat facing Shinji. They very quickly, since he can't move, can't do anything, retract the whole thing in, keeps him from getting loaded in. Misato especially is very competent this episode. She especially takes charge of the thing. For the first time, after seeing what a silly person she can be sometimes and how slovenly in her personal life, getting to see how she reacts really under fire, like why she might have this job in the first place, was a nice look both about how NERV works and how she herself responds under fire. For the first time, for the first time, it doesn't seem like, well, we need someone who's a commander. Why not make it this flirty, older sister kind of figure? just to fill out our bases. For the first time, Misato really does seem like, oh, this is why she's in charge of operations. They very well, we'll run through the whole details, but they very quickly do all these things, have this whole protocol set up to pull him down, resuscitate him, get his heart going again, pull him out, when it's all done with machines. Like, they obviously are ready to do this kind of thing very quickly. And she's down there to see what's going on. Obvious concern. And anyway, I thought this, and this was a pattern all the way through this episode, this competent response to the situation was, I think, it really let us know that NERV is competent, that there's a reason they were chosen for all this, that despite the small skeleton crew and the kind of silly things we've seen them do, not silly, but the kind of things that seem slipshod, at their heart, they actually are equal to this task. The task that they understand, at least. Right, and it is, of course, it is Misato who races down there. Nobody else has the personal stakes in Shinji. It's great that he's actually made friends at school, but inside NERV, it's still pretty much just Misato. We shouldn't hold our breath for Gendo. It doesn't look like Ritsuko is not hostile, but she clearly is the kind who's going to prioritize her work first. And we've had enough exchanges with her and Shinji at work to know that that's the case. No matter how she acted in the apartment last time, how familiar, how much she's kind of tweaking him by playing matchmaker. But again, having Misato stay with him rushed all the way into intensive care, and then began one of these nice cinematic moments, the way this is composed to emphasize how small she is, how helpless she feels in the situation, the fact that she lingers there a moment, just doesn't immediately get back to work. It's all nice visual storytelling. This episode, too, has a lot of good ones, which I can't fetch for you like I want to. I apologize. Now, the very next thing she starts doing, once she's taken charge and has to meet the threat, she starts testing the thing. She has all these kind of inventive ways to gauge what it's capable of and try to figure out its behavior. It's really quite clever. Trying the scale balloon dummy. Like, I love the fact that they had this to whip out on short order, too, you know? Like, you know what we need? Yeah, tanks and weapons and all that's nice, but how about a giant parade float of our Evangelion? This secret thing that no one should know who exists. Anyway, through this testing, they very quickly, kind of cleverly get a sense of things. And you can see her satisfaction here at having, as far as she knows, having solved the dilemma. And just like last time, this is us finding out a little bit more about the angels. The fact that it then stops immediately over NERV headquarters and begins drilling down is a further explanation of what the angels are after. It was kind of implied in the first episode that once they... Oh, that's scratchy. Better? Yes. It was kind of implied in the first episode that the angel was changed what it was doing once it figured out where they were. That Gendo, I think, remarks that it seems to have figured out where they are. And so we already have we already know that getting to NERV headquarters is their goal. And so this just reinforces that. The drilling down directly into the geofront that the angel does, there's no mistaking that intent, right? That's not random. That is not just deliberate, but very precise. And bringing this new solution to bear makes you wonder, are the angels sending the right tool to the job? Or is it just random which ones show up? is each one a response to what's happened before that? And so the angels are unknowable. I know I keep saying that. But we don't have to understand what they want necessarily, so long as their goal in this matter is clear. If I was doing like the normal goals conflicts thing, yes, they have an unknown goal, but clearly getting to NERV headquarters is a goal. To what end, we do not know. But because we know that, because we know what the victory-failure condition is in their goal, we don't have to know much more about the angels to understand the stakes of the scenes that contain them, right? That is an accessible goal to us. We understand it. We understand, now that we've seen several attempts to achieve that goal, no matter what the end is, we know how we should feel about the stakes in the scene. So what happens this time, instead of it being just a giant fight, is we instead have a beat the clock kind of mini plot, where the thing is going to just try to drill down through layers of armor plating to get to NERV. Now, while drilling down tells us a lot about the angels, the fact that all of those armor plating exist in the first place tells us that NERV anticipated this. NERV actually knew that whenever angels showed back up, however it was they knew that it would show back up, this is something they need to be prepared for. So, oh, here we go. Here's the armor shields. And so while we're able to infer a little bit of the angels' goals out of the way this one attacks, while we already had kind of a good notion of it, the Evangelions are not their goal. We can conclude that pretty well. This thing kind of auto-self-destructs things in its range, anything that could interfere. But it stops everything to hold its position and drill down. So that is obviously the main goal. The fact that NERV is ready for that means that they know that that's the goal. What we don't know is why. Why do they care? If it's not destroying the Evangelions, which seems to be the case since it didn't do anything directly against the Avas later on in the episode, it lets us know that the Evangelions are not the reason these things are trying to attack NERV headquarters. It's something else. So, and yeah, the fact that Gendo has Shinji show up at the very moment that our first angel, which is really the third angel, shows up, further suggests that they knew to expect maybe exactly when, but certainly something. And there was obviously a long time to prepare for this, even if only a few people understand why. So, but yeah, the time limit is pointing out that's a great way to make tension. It is, and it actually gives us a chance to see how NERV responds to this. If this was every single second could be the end of the conflict for good or bad moment, we wouldn't actually get at this peak besides the infrastructure. And what we get to see is that A, Misato really is competent in a pinch, and B, Gendo entrusts her with all this. When she presents his plan, he's like, I got no reason to object, roll with it. And the power they have. They requisition equipment from nearby. They're able on short notice to be, we're just going to take all of Japan's power. Somebody put out a press release, but we're taking the power. NERV is actually a formidable organization. Not in a shadowy kind of way, but on a world stage way. So this is the first really detailed demonstration of that. And because it comes side by side with the angel drilling, it makes us wonder, is that what the angels are after at this stage? Or is it NERV actually really the biggest threat, so better to cut off the head? So it's I don't know, I think the timing on that's pretty clever, I think. As I keep restarting this, I keep losing my notes. There was a couple of little things that were kind of cool. While they're testing how the angel works, the fact that they can see the actual AT field is commented on that indicates how strong it is. That the visual of the AT field somehow indicates its strength. Little detail. I thought that was nice because we don't know what the AT field really is in that first episode where nothing seems to work on the first angel. Obviously, that one wasn't as strong, yet was strong enough to keep the N2 mine from doing anything more than superficial damage, that it just had to stand in place and regenerate. So the fact that this one has this visual shield now tells us that it has an even stronger AT field. So, which of course tells us that the AT fields can vary in strength. I think the Magi supercomputer was named for the first time here when Misato was presenting her plan to Gendo. There's a lot of like teasing out the little world building things first before we actually will find out more about them. It sets us up to know they will be important. We're not going to derail everything to get to them later. But when they do come up again, because we've recognized that, we realize, oh, this is important. Let's pay attention to this. We can filter out all of the technobabble and all that gobbledygook and the activation sequence and all that. As long as we get the general sense if things are going good or bad, doesn't matter so much. But when things like this are named and then they come up again later, it gives us a little emphasis on we know that's a little bit more important. We should pay more attention to that. So things like the AT field coming up multiple times, we understand that's supposed to be important. Now, besides Misato's competence, we actually see Rei operate her Evangelion for the first time in like the most mundane possible way. The first thing she does as a successful Ava pilot is pull the roof off the warehouse where that equipment is and lift it out. There we go, right there. So her very first mission is to play Pack Mule. But the fact they're confident in having her handle this very delicate piece of machinery means that her control must be pretty good indeed, right? So I do think it's funny that it should be this huge event she's rolling out if the very first thing she does is just carry some stuff. Let's see, that's the power of power going out. All the other things they can bring to bear under short notice. It's kind of cool. Now, Misato calls this operation, this sniper plan. Crackling. Let me fix it. All right, hopefully that's better. By the way, the problem with microphones, just an aside, converting from analog to digital and back again, there's just a lot of points of failure. So, now, Misato names this, what's my notes? Operation Yashima. All right. And so I figured I'd go dig up what that is and I'll share it with you. There is a Battle of Yashima in 12th century Japan. And why it's notable, why I think it's relevant to her choice of name, is there is this kind of folklore account of these two clans that are fighting. And one clan essentially issues a challenge to the other one. They have a little boat, and they take a fan and put it up on top of a pole, okay? And they challenge the other clan to shoot down that fan, to knock it off. And as the folklore goes, that one of the opposing samurai rode his horse into the water, knocks his bow, and does knock it down with a single shot. So the folklore from this name is indicating an incredible feat of archery, an incredible bit of long-distance targeting. So that, I think, is the reason for that choice of name for the operation. Now, when Shinji wakes up, And I guess this is partially because Misato is busy doing her actual job. But when Shinji wakes up, the actual first person to see him in the hospital is Rei. And so there's this moment where you think, oh, maybe his tiny effort to reach out has had some kind of impact on her. Maybe there's like some fruit to those first seeds. But it actually doesn't take long for that to be dispelled, because she immediately just launches into the operation schedule, not asking how he is, not asking if he's up to it, not even asking will you be able to. Just in complete robot fashion, whips out her little notebook and starts running through the entire thing. So that brief hope was immediately dashed. The fact that we in the audience are sitting in the hospital bed looking up at Rei, just as Shinji would be, is definitely we're meant to share in the way he's feeling right now. That, all right, obviously no progress has been made here, except at the very end of their exchange, when he is not, when he once again doesn't want to get in the robot. Oh gosh, where is this? She actually, and I kind of wonder if this comes from her or from Gendo, that she simply says if he doesn't do it, she'll pilot Unit 1 in his place. That is to say, I will replace you. And I don't know if this comes from her or from Gendo, but it definitely is playing on that insecurity from last time, where he saw that Gendo is capable of treating Rei in a much warmer way than he treats Shinji, and so it's not a situation where he has no friendliness, no parenting, no way to connect to someone that age. He's just choosing to do it for someone else. And so I imagine he feels a little bit replaced in that role right now. So when she is kind of matter-of-factly saying, well, I'll just replace you as a pilot, also, you know, if that's coming from Rei, it's very, it's a very manipulative. That's why I really wonder if it comes from her. So I'm not sure this tells us much about Rei, right? We're still kind of trying to sort her out. The one thing we do have is we once again, this time it's Shinji's nudity instead of her own, but she also doesn't react. She also doesn't care as much as he does. And so I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this is actually Rei kind of continuing her little bit of curtness towards him, suggesting that I'll just replace you? Or is it something else? Is this coming from her, I guess, is my question. I'm not sure I've made up my mind on it either way. Yeah, Flying Simi and I agree that Rei has some initial opinion of Shinji right now. It's probably indicating the way she's acting, but I don't know what. Maybe she's trying to relieve him of the pain in her own weird way. I wouldn't put this past Rei as a way of showing affection at this point. And yeah, maybe there is no ulterior motive. Maybe she's just matter of fact saying, if you don't go, then logically I will. It might be that seeing the mission through is the only thing she cares about. But it is the thing, I think, that gets him out of bed. We don't have to question it. We go from her stating that and leaving, cutting to him actually, she shares the fact that they've made preparations to sub her out if necessary. So, now, I just want to point out just briefly that despite everything, Kinski's enthusiasm for all this going on hasn't been dulled. What I think is important is they got some other guy classmates to come along as well, which I think suggests in a very subtle way that Shinji actually is fitting in a little bit better than school. That it's not just these two guys who saw his empathy. Maybe it starts with that. Maybe seeing him be accepted then has a ripple effect. The fact these other guys came along with those two and came out to see all this, like I said, they didn't have to draw those background characters, right? I think that means something. So we won't spend too long on that. And maybe this is just, guys like giant robots and battle and all the preparation for that. I enjoy all about the detailing they did to show us the effort required to pull in all of the power from all of Japan. They definitely didn't want us to feel like it was just an aside. Oh, just take all the power and then it's done, right? They go to the effort to show us that this is an ordeal. There's it'll take the engineering group this many hours to sort this out, and the people converting the thing they requisitioned this many hours to complete it. You can see everyone's working around the clock to do it. And so they want us to understand the scale of this, right? This is outside the normal operating condition. This is them responding to a threat that they weren't prepared for exactly, but they have the ability to come up with these ad hoc solutions under fire. But more importantly, I guess, have the manpower and technical know-how to do this. So I think showing these kinds of shots, lingering over them, is really trying to impress upon us the reach and competence of NERV. I think that's been a big thing for this episode. Which again is just setting our expectations up for what NERV will be capable of in the future. Yeah. There are just a couple of little things. The fact that they would put Rei into Unit 1 instead of using her own Unit 0 on the chance that Shinji doesn't do that is interesting, isn't it? Especially since she obviously can operate it now. This suggests that there is something about 0-1 that is preferable to Unit 0. But what happens in this little scene, where Misato is telling them what their assignments are, is that the reason that Shinji and 0-1 are the gunners is because Shinji has a higher sync rate with Unit 0-1. Which means that despite all of Shinji's problems and his hesitation to this, he was ready to bail once again, he is still a little bit better at this than Rei, or at least he syncs better with his Ava than she syncs with her own. And so that again just goes back to, while we saw her activate just fine, and we have probably a good idea about why, she still isn't as capable with hers as Shinji is with his. And I don't think it's spelled out, but it makes me wonder if she could sync with 0-1 better than 0-0 at this point. They don't specify if that's why she would be the gunner, or it's because some inherent quality of 0-1. Anyway. The plan made, all the preparations laid out and executed. All we need now is to go to the actual battle. But before that happens, we once again will put things on hold for the small things. The adolescent idiosyncrasies. And in this case, it's them changing into their plug suits. And the little screen between them gives them privacy, but does not hide silhouette, right? And so this time, for sure, we, the audience, are being put in the role of voyeur, so we can kind of experience what Shinji is. and his both discomfort and intrigue. Or that's how it should be, right? Instead, Shinji is not flustered like he was before, right? Because he's preoccupied with what's about to happen. He's worried about dying. And I know he had the near-death experience with this very same angel earlier on, so this is more than just his normal hesitation about everything, right? And expressing this fear of death, the fact that he's even comfortable broaching this with Rei says that despite their exchanges so far, he is warming up to her. The way the two of them approach this little conversation, where he's obviously worried and trying to use it to connect. This goes back to this very same thing last time, where he was asking her if she was worried about the startups ritual in when they were taking the escalator ride. He is trying to see if they're approaching things the same way. He's trying to create that empathetic link, so to close the distance between them, and she still isn't. She's wonders why he even wonders if they will die, why he's even worried about it. But what's different this time is she asserts that he won't die, but it's not bravado. Instead, she is saying that she is going to do her job. Her job is to play defense, her job is to protect him. Ergo, you will be fine because I will do my job. So this is not personal stakes in Shinji. This is her doing her job, I think. But to me, this is not the connection that Shinji wanted, in the sense that he's not happy to hear this necessarily. Okay, it's nice that you have my back, but that conversation, I don't think he was looking for reassurance in this situation. I think it's on his mind. He wants to share how he's feeling. He wants to know if she's feeling the same way. And she kind of dodges the question in a sense, because she doesn't say whether she's worried about dying or that she won't die. She simply asserts that he won't die because that's her job, to keep him from dying. I mean, I'm sure that's reassuring in a sense when he's got the butterflies, but I just don't think reassurance is what he was going for here. Anyway, we're treated to more imagery to let us understand the scale of this. We have another kind of moment where the two of them can talk after that. There's a lot of times in this series where the pilots and their Avas will be standing nearby and nobody else, as though the Avas themselves are waiting around and are part of the conversation. There should be several of them. Again, the choice of angle here and the choice of the way this is framed is extremely deliberate. Because while here they are, should be very close to their Avas in the sense that they sync with them and all this, and the way they speak of them third person, I mean, obviously, but rather than the way this is shot showing solidarity between them, this conversation is betraying the opposite. That he doesn't understand Rei, and he's trying to. He keeps going over it, right? This is like it's an itch he can't scratch. And so despite the situation, and despite the way she keeps rebuffing him, he keeps coming after her. And she actually kind of doesn't have a pat answer to this. She actually has a very interesting answer. That it is her link. And he assumes she means it's her link to Gendo. That was where he went with it, because, again, I think we talked about the paranoia that she might be sitting in his role as surrogate child. That's what he says exactly, right? I'm sorry, I can't play the way he says that, but if I recall, there's this kind of disappointment in that, to my father. But she inserts instead that it is her link to everyone. And so the fact that she's expressing even a desire to be linked to everyone that feels like new information, right? That feels like, in the framing, there is a literal gap between them, reinforcing what's happening in scene. It's reinforced by the composition of that scene. Oh, you're fine, man. Rey expressing that she wants to be linked to anyone else at all. The way she stops and thinks about that, I have a question for you. Is this how she's felt all along? Or is this how she feels about the Evangelions now because of Gendo putting himself on the line and the reason she was able to be successful? That now she understands that the Evangelions will let her link to at least him, but maybe to everyone. That despite how bad she is at living, it seems, that this can give her purpose in a sense, like the same way it gives Shinji some validation when he succeeds, even though he hates it. I guess what I'm saying, she takes a second to think about it. She looks down like she has to puzzle with the thought when he asks that. Back up to it. She takes a second to think about it, right? Like he asks her, and she has to ponder. And so do you think this is a new development? Do you think this is the thing she now wants that maybe didn't before, and she's succeeding now where she wasn't before because of this expressed desire? Rey probably wants to be connected because she's so cut off. I agree, sure. I think she has felt like this before. The first episode, she is hurt. She comes when Gendo calls her. I agree, but that might be different than feeling connected to everyone, which is what she's expressing here. You could argue at that point it is still something of duty. To be afraid of dying, you need something to live for, and maybe this is all she has. Well, interesting caveat on that. I don't think she's actually afraid of dying. That is actually, in fact, I think what she is afraid of is living without this thing, which we'll talk about in a second. She sees this as the only way to not be robotic-like. Yeah, I mean, she definitely has shown more emotional depth in these two episodes than we've seen before. We often want what we can't have. Yes, a tale as old as time. She saw the attention that Shinji got at school. Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about Rey's death in a second here, but being helpful, being part of a team might help her connect in a small way. Yeah, I can see that. She is afraid of living without purpose. Yeah, I think that's on point. I think that's definitely what she's expressing here in a moment. We'll get to that. Well, she's emotionless at all. She's just closed off to everyone who isn't Gendo. For sure. And I think Shinji bringing the negative emotions out of her, just as much as it does in these last couple episodes, really has the very first beginning of shading in Rey as a character. And let's not skip over the fact that Rey actually does give Shinji an answer here, right? She doesn't deflect. She doesn't give some stand. She doesn't give some sort of pat answer about how it's her duty. That would have been a pretty easy out, right? And we can understand probably a lot of the things she does comes from that mindset, like reading off the schedule earlier. This is a personal answer. and she's giving it to Shinji, right? So, while it's not like they are suddenly friends at this point, I feel like this could be the first time of her reciprocating just a little bit, because she doesn't have to share this. This is a pretty personal thing to say, honestly. Especially when she has such an easy out. See if we can get no static this time. Yeah, I believe you. Her answer is sincere. Has Rei talked to or interacted with anyone besides Gendo or Shinji until now? Well, she hardly talks at all, so it's hard to say if you would count, people wheeling her by and so forth as interaction. Outside of Masato giving her orders and her responding to them, I don't think so. I do not recall. She might be finding her humanity in her service, because this is as close as she can get to feeling connected. I see that for sure. But yeah, I do think Shinji and Gendo being father and son probably helps Shinji get past this barrier that no one else is. In fact, there was that moment where, oh man, we're gonna run out of time again. If you recall, there was that moment. Well, we'll get to that, honestly. Anyway, that is my yes. Yeah, exactly. We don't actually know what she and Gendo say to each other. We read their body language, and that seemed and Shinji too. It seemed very affable. If you didn't know anything else about the two of them, that would seem like two people who are friendly with one another. You know? I mean, Rei runs up to him, and her body position is almost like it's not flirty, but it's almost like a young girl guy she admires kind of way she holds herself. So I think you can read a lot into that, even if you don't hear the words. But you're right, they could have just been talking shop, and the thing is, what they said's probably not as important as what their body language tells us about the way they interact. So, anyway, just a couple more things on this, and because of timing, I'm going to not moderate the all series discussion once more. We don't need to run. Oh. We don't need to. We don't need to run through the details of this operation, really. It does a great job of showing the scale. We see how clever that the angel has some cleverness to it, the way it shoots a beam back to interfere with the precise targeting at first, and then can recharge and fire back much faster than the whole of Japan, which gives us another sense of their power. They really are self-contained weapons to have power of that scale. But the critical thing about this, actually, the battle, is what Rei does and what she says before it happens. We got this little scene right here at the end of that conversation where she signs off by saying to him, "Sayonara." Not that they're friendly enough for something familiar like "Shane," like "see you later," but we're going back to the sub versus dub thing again. But sayonara is not something you say to someone you think you're about to see again in a little while. It's a much more a lengthier break, or even a going on to one's death kind of thing, a permanent separation. Which is why it's very significant that she says this in this moment, because he will refer to what she says at the end. Yes, there's a finality to it. And of course the framing here, even if they have changed the Fly Me to the Moon ending credits, we still get to see the kind of image of Rey turning in front of the moon. And so we already have a visual association between the two. And so it's a very, again, this episode in particular is full of shots like this. Anyway, Rey does her duty indeed. She does put herself in harm's way. She does protect Shinji. They win the day. And then, in the most deliberate parallel ever, Shinji also puts himself in harm's way to get into the entry plug. You can see the heat, just like Gendo went through, goes through, shows a concern about her, and she does not fail to notice the parallel either, right? Let's see. We'll get to that. Despite how far apart they are, Shinji's reaction is very emotional. It's emotional in the very same way that Gendo was when he came to her aid before. He's not as quick to tears as Shinji, but the concern, in both cases, the concern is plain to Rey. Despite all of her problems, she can't fail to miss it. And so Shinji kind of chastises her for the way she signed off. That's why it's important, the choice of word there. And she's internalizing this. She hears what he's saying. It's again, say like farewell is not quite the same. Doesn't have quite the same impact in English. Doesn't have the same connotation. Now, despite that, and I love the shot of the two of them crouched down here. Despite that, Rey is again honest that she doesn't understand the situation. She doesn't know why he's crying. She understands that he's emotionally involved, but she still can't connect to humanity and to Shinji enough to understand this, right? But she at least is honest about it. I don't know how to react, how to act at times like this. At least she's self-aware about it, right? But that is one more personal admission to Shinji, along with the thing about the link, along with her saying that she had nothing else to live for. And she doesn't know how to deal with this expression towards concern. She doesn't even understand what it is. And y'all are saying that she doesn't seem to have any self-worth. I agree. This is, and it's a problem they share too. Is where does your self-worth come from? But now we got to peek inside how she lives and how she interacts and how her mental instability. Despite the fact that she doesn't cry and she doesn't get emotional very easily, she probably has a much worse sense of self-worth. But which is why I think it's still significant that she's able to admit this to him, right? Like, I think it is, at this point, what we see in the story, that she is giving him honest answers, not pat answers, tells us a lot. It doesn't tell us yet a lot about Rey, necessarily. It's first glimpse, I'll admit, but I think it's more significant that Shinji is the one she's reacting to. Anyway, he recommends she smiles. I think there's been much debate about whether this is a genuine smile or just something she's doing or not. But the key point is the suggestion that she should just smile. And she goes from seeing Shinji reflected in her eyes to seeing Gendo in turn. So there's no missing that. She's now seeing the Gendo in Shinji, if it were. She reacts in surprise. It's great visual storytelling because it's very fast, and it makes us understand how that from here the two of them could actually start to develop a relationship different than what they are. So there it is. There's Ray's famous smile. Now, yeah, she's not a people person. You can say that again. Um, let's try that again. Okay. Yeah. So what's your take on the little smile here? And I see some people were saying, I think it's real. I think it's genuine. I think it's creepy. That she's seeing the similarity between Shinji and Gendo. I don't know if she yet sees the similarity between her and Shinji. But is this a smile she's just doing on command? Because she doesn't know what else to do in the situation. She doesn't understand social protocol. Or is she actually getting to associate this feeling? This is a feeling where a smile should be associated. You should feel good about this. I don't know. Some people just look creepy when they smile. Yeah. She doesn't even practice smiling. Yeah. Yeah, a genuine attempt, if perhaps not the most convincing smile. Or the smile is Ray's attempt to connect with Shinji. That she wants to. She's not doing this because she's asked, basically. Yeah. We don't have enough about her to know right now, I feel like. And I like that that you could make an argument either way. But considering the storytellers use this as the way they want to end the episode, seems to give it the weight of sincerity to me. Yeah, she's trying. Maybe it's not the best smile ever, but the fact that she's, again, not just giving the pat answer. This is multiple times here right at the end of this episode, after all the failed attempts by Shinji to bridge the gap, where she is giving answers she doesn't have to. She's giving personal opinions, showing a side of her that's probably vulnerable. And she's doing it to Shinji. And we get the impression that she doesn't do this normally. That Shinji is special to have gotten through this, and now that she makes the association with him and Gendo at the end here, it seems like this is at least meant to be interpreted by us as a jumping off point. That just as Shinji was able to connect to some of his classmates, and that is having payoff and having a ripple effect. We got the other guys out there watching him. I think we're set up to expect something similar between him and Ray to develop at this point. Right? Yeah, she doesn't have to, but she does. I think that's actually the thing to take away from the thing she says here, is not to try to psychoanalyze everything she says off of 3 or 4 sentences, but rather the fact she didn't have to and did anyway. Shinji gets reactions out of her that other people are not getting out of her. And I think that is the important part of this initial exploration of her character. So. All right. I think we need to. I think we need to take our break. We won't be able to come back in time to do the second half. So what I'm going to do is I must let everyone who wants to stay in chat. You can relax your spoiler restrictions. I won't be here anyway, but at the end of the next episode, I will definitely see. I intentionally, on these dual broadcast days, give you enough time to watch the upcoming episodes and some buffer time if you're only caught up to what we're doing at the time. That's why these gaps exist. That's why there's a much longer one when we get to the end before the first movie, that'll probably be a very short session. But so I do not want to let that all spoiler discussion overrun that. So yes, we'll do 7 and 8. You should have an hour and a half. We'll start that one late too, so you have an actual hour and a half. And because I didn't want you to feel like you couldn't catch up. And it's helpful for me too, so I don't mistake, because I'm about to go watch them myself, so they're fresh in my mind, exactly what we should know at this point. So, when I sign off here in a moment, consider chat to be spoiler. All spoilers. You can do whatever you want. So, the other rules still apply. Don't attack each other. Don't talk personal stuff. Discussion. Yesterday, if you weren't here, the power cut off the end of my broadcast yesterday, and my battery backup, my modem, and router, and the main computer, and some other things run off it for a little while. And so I just got out a Chromebook, and we kind of had a version of it in chat only until the power supply eventually ran out, and I was permanently offline. So I want to let you have the break now. We'll do that again, except I won't be here at the end of the next session. Finally, fourth time's the charm, I will moderate a discussion. And when I say moderate, I really mean that. I've intentionally not rewatched some of the later episodes on this so that I can rebuild my interpretation of this whole thing when we get to especially episodes 25 and 26 and End of Evangelion. So I will not be useful for a lot of things. My opinion won't be very good for a lot of things, but I do want to help kind of moderate that to let people talk about whatever they want to as far as this series goes without fear of the spoiler restrictions. Especially so as we go along, we talk about little things like this, new things will probably occur to you. New connections will probably be made. That's the beauty of writing through all this kind of stuff. So, I am going to go take 1.5 hour break. We will start back at 10 minutes past when we were supposed to start, because apparently that's just my new pattern. And then we'll resume. So when I sign off, if you're avoiding spoilers, you don't want to hear anything past this, I'm gonna sign off here in just a moment. Chat's gonna be full of spoilers if people want to do that. So if you were trying to avoid spoilers, this is your chance to duck out of the room, okay? Don't get hit by lightning. Thank you. That's I wake up every day with that goal. Yeah, thanks for the congrats. I'm sorry for I stayed up so late to hopefully solve technical issues, and they still haven't. Just was gonna be. Tiny thing, just so to let people sign off if they want to. The music service that I paid for is called Pretzel Rocks. It's actually a lot of streamers use it. The only thing you get from paying is that it doesn't insist on spamming your chat with everything. But I just like the opportunity to pay artists if you give me that opportunity. So I went ahead and paid for it. But eventually I'll be able to set up a little more integration into this. You'll be able to actually kind of control what's going on. Right now I just want to pick a playlist that was instrumental only. I haven't done any curating of this, so I was kind of an all over the map. I'm listening to it too. But it helps cover up some of the ambient stuff that I can't otherwise knock out. And so hopefully it makes the whole experience seem a little more coherent. And yeah. Alright, I'm signing off. You may talk about whatever you want now. I'll see you in an hour and a half.